Oh, hey America. What's up, gang? So, what have we all gathered here today? We've talked so much about, Mike Gravel, Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, a little bit about Elizabeth Warren, but we haven't really got into Tulsi Gabbard. This is Bernie Sanders' mini-me, right? She endorsed Bernie. She looked at what Bernie was talking about, what Hillary was talking about, and she chose Bernie Sanders. And yet she criticized socialism. So this is incredible. What did she see in Bernie, right, a democratic socialist? And yet there's a quote, if you want to see how socialism works, check out Venezuela, which is a criticism of mine. Now, I had Tulsi Gabbard at number one when I first, started looking at all these different candidates. Now my list is number one's Bernie Sanders. Let's just be honest. Let's just, no method to the, no, just, who are you going to vote for? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is, we didn't get the title bout 4 years ago with Bernie. He's been, incredibly consistent his entire life. So he's showing moral courage his entire life. There's, a number of issues that Bernie represents. He's also a fighter, and he represents working people. So he's, he would topple Donald. There's no comparison. In fact, that was the point of electing a Donald, to win by losing. He, is terrible, and then we could vote for Bernie Sanders. So now's the time to strike. Noam Chomsky, waited forever until he got on the Bernie Sanders train. So this is, start speaking up about Bernie right now. And it's not just your stupid one little vote, you fucking, pretentious twat. Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg. Marianne Williamson, I like. She's anti-plan, so she's not really a serious candidate. Mike Gravel's dropped out. Or is volatile. I don't know what the hell's going on with his campaign. Eric Swalwell's dropped out. So you have, Bernie Sanders, my number one. Tulsi should be good for, defense secretary. Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris. I'd actually tied them all at 3, but I did order them that way. So I guess Cory, he's a street fighter. Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris. They've already, Elizabeth Warren, she's been around longer. She's been a progressive, so more familiar with Elizabeth Warren. Kamala Harris is a very, awesome, brand new, political operative on the scene. So is Pete Buttigieg. Cory Booker's in street fight, and he's a senator. He's done criminal justice reform, and he's a very lackluster candidate when it actually comes down to, what he knows and what he doesn't know. So I don't know if he's, okay, so that's my list, okay? Bernie Sanders is number one, Tulsi Gabbard is number 2. Tulsi Gabbard has a ton of things that's good for, going good for her. Let's talk about the criticisms first, because that's always more fun, right? So the criticisms of Tulsi Gabbard, there's actually a bunch of them, and when it comes to War and Peace, well, we'll get to that. So she wants to protect the anti-democratic electoral college. So she's protecting this, archaic relic of the past. And it's against democracy. It's against the people. It's fundamentally against the people. We don't vote for the president. We vote for the voters who vote for the president. Unless, they tie or there's not a majority. And then the House of Representatives votes for them. So if the people that we vote for don't vote for the people, then they don't get then it goes to the House. And then that's the other people that we had voted for. Then they voted for the new president. And then that's, my God, do we even have the right to vote? Do we even have any power whatsoever as a voter? With the Electoral College, she favors Christian refugees over Muslim refugees. She says to understand socialism, look at Venezuela. Okay, well, why don't you look at Sweden, Germany, Norway, Denmark, Canada, Finland. They're socialist nations. They've been successful. So it seems as though Tulsi is bought into the propaganda. We've been a mixed socialist capitalist nation for the last 70 years since the New Deal. When did we get, food stamps? When did we get public schools? When did we get, public roads? When did all that happen? So, Sweden, Norway. So it's ironic that she gives this courageous, full-throated endorsement of Bernie Sanders in 2016 as socialist. In spite of the fallout, she loses her post and she's getting all this criticism. And she's also has a staunch opposition to the Venezuelan war, which was better than Bernie Sanders. She was to the left of Bernie Sanders on the Venezuelan war. And yet she's going to say something like, to understand socialism, look at Venezuela. I want a balanced president, a socialist capitalist, an Eisenhower socialist. I want, a little bit of conservative, a little bit of liberal. I don't want just one person that says, I'm always liberal, I'm always conservative. That's not good enough for me. We're all dynamic people, so if you're always just like, well, if we always just keep it the same, it's always better. If we always change things, if we always lead by our heart, if we always lead by our brain, if we always care about the individual, if we always care about the community. Let's get some balance, motherfucking people. Jesus fucking Christ. Socialist, capitalist, liberal, conservative. Give a shit about people. Be smart about stuff. Liberals go too far with their bleeding hearts. Conservatives go too far with their psychoticness. So she's opposed to requiring photo IDs at the voting booths, which I disagree with. Not a big deal. That's okay. So those are my criticisms. Now let's talk about all the stuff. Well, also I haven't heard her speak on universal basic income, instant runoff voting, or universal child care. So that's major. That's first one, cures poverty. Second one cures our democracy. Independence will have a chance, and then universal child care is Bernie Sanders. So I assume because she endorsed Bernie Sanders that she had, a lot. But I guess it was just obvious, to be honest with you, to Tulsi, when it comes to Bernie versus Hillary. Of course, Bernie is better. What kind of fucking fool would choose Hillary over Bernie? What kind of moron? I mean, my God, you want to talk to, listen to somebody that just is a total psychopath? So Tulsi Gabbard, she's in favor of paper ballots. She's in favor of automatic voter registration. She's for statehood for Washington, D.C. Mike Gravel, Pete Buttigieg also wants statehood for D.C. Puerto Rico as well. Tulsi is for a public option added on to Obamacare. She does not want to wipe out the private insurance groups. She wants to reinstate Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall is, a banking regulation. She opposed the Trump tax cuts, and she's in favor of federal stimulus spending. Mayor Pete Buttigieg, he wants all the gun owners in America to register into a national gun registry. There was just a shooting recently, so everybody's going, gaga over it. Tulsi is for some gun control, FBI background checks, assault weapons ban, but she voted for the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act of 2017. Tulsi Gabbard is for the legalization of marijuana. She passed immunity laws for the banks of the marijuana industry. Bernie Sanders, Mike Gravel, Tulsi Gabbard are the only three Democrats who opposed Nixon's 1971 war on drugs in its entirety. Kamala Harris is now for the legalization of marijuana. She wasn't when she was Attorney General and prosecutor. So it takes what? Just for everybody to know that every state in the union has to legalize it before some of these right-wing fascist bastards fucking figure this shit out? Give me a fucking break. So that's pretty big for Tulsi Gabbard. Only Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard are opposed to the war on drugs. In a recent interview, Bernie again said he was opposed to the war on drugs. This is a federal program. It's been around for a long time, and it's almost unanimous across the board. I've never heard anybody else in my adventures ever, verbally say, yeah, the war on drugs is bullshit. Tulsi Gabbard thinks the war on drugs is bullshit. Bernie Sanders, Mike Gravel also think it's bullshit. Tulsi Gabbard's going to drop the charges against Julian Assange, Edward Snowden. Here she's better than Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren says Julian Assange is a bad actor. Okay, well, she's going to drop the charges against him, which she should. Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, these are heroes. These are American heroes. We should put them in positions, that can help everybody else. They were moral and courageous. They're courageous in their stance for right and wrong. So Elizabeth Warren is wrong on that. Tulsi Gabbard is correct on that. Tulsi Gabbard will restrict the domestic monitoring of all of our phone calls. She will end the bulk data collection. Data collection of all of our emails under the Patriot Act. Tulsi's record on gay marriage and gay rights is 100%. She would, if necessary, fight and die for gay folks. She's a soldier. So, she's there fighting for her fellow Americans, whether they're gay, straight, male, female, black, white, religious, non-religious. She's pro-choice. Even for abortions past the 20th week of pregnancy, Tulsi will cap the usury of banks who maximize their interest rates. So pro-choice, wants to, you know, do this and that. I used to think war and peace were her biggest issues. War and peace. On Venezuela, she's to the left of Bernie, but on Palestine, Bernie is to the left of Tulsi. And Bernie Sanders, being Jewish, he's, you know, got a special, a unique place in history, a unique perspective on the whole thing, because, you know, he's Jewish, and he very much cares about the Jewish nation, the Jewish people. He cares about Israel. In fact, he wants a two-state solution, so he's going to eliminate the one-state solution. It's not even an option to Bernie Sanders, so that's limited to only the two-state solution, but Bernie Sanders will actually enforce the two-state solution. He's pointed out that there's illegal settlements, that we need to end the blockade. We need to align the 1967 borders with Jerusalem as a capital. Tells Israel to stop their killing, stop shooting, you know, targeting killings, stop shooting unarmed protesters. So Bernie Sanders has been a virulent critic of Palestine, and that's, or of Israel. Everybody criticizes Palestine. Everybody criticizes. But Israel, they seem to get, you know, get out of jail free card for the rest of their lives for some apparent reason. Bernie Sanders isn't going to let Israel get away with their criminal bullshit. He's for a two-state solution, and he wants to protect the Jewish nation. He wants to make sure that Israel stays Jewish, and the only way that's going to happen is if Palestine stays Muslim. So you're going to have Palestine, Muslim nation country on one side, and a Jewish country on the other. If you want to eliminate the Jewish country, well then just combine the two and have a nice democracy, which is what Mike Gravel wants. Now, saying all this, when it comes to the BDS movement, Bernie Sanders is opposed to it personally, privately, but the tactics are essentially, you know, boycott, divest, sanction. Those are smart tactics to go against any, you know, group or entity that you don't like. You should boycott all the groups and divest and sanction all the groups you don't like. And so the tactic, he's not against the tactics, but the BDS movement itself, he's not, you know, in favor of. Mike Gravel, on the other hand, wants to protect the BDS movement. He wants to protect the BDS movement, and he wants to make sure that, you know, we have the freedom to do as we choose. We don't have to buy Israeli goods. So the one-state solution is out because Mike Gravel is out, so we're just stuck with the two-state solution from Bernie Sanders. Now, when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard just signed on to that anti-BDS bill. I just read a New York Times article, but it said that it was anti-Semitic. We have unearthed it, and the founder, the guy, and he doesn't say anything bad about the Jewish people. He just says that something about Palestine, that a Jewish nation is not congruous with Palestine. And so they're saying, well, that means you don't think we should have, well, it's there already. So I feel like they're kind of making different connections. They're essentially saying, I don't know. I know that specifically BDS, I'm not opposed to BDS, those tactics, and Israel needs to cut their shit. They need to cut the fucking crap. If they cut their crap, then I wouldn't be for BDS. But I'm totally for BDS because they have, you know, treating the Palestinians, they got that open-air concentration camp. They got it militarily surrounded. It's a blockade. Nobody can come in and out. 99% of the Palestinians got to stay in. Half of them are impoverished. So they're malnourished. There's not any food coming in. There's, you know, poverty all over the place. And the military checkpoints and the wall, the blockade, this is all militarily, so nobody can come in, nobody can go out. This is all the design of Israel. And it's bullshit. They've been doing the blockade for 12 years, and I'm not sure how long this, you know, open-air concentration camp has been going on, but Israel established themselves in 1948. They killed 13,000 Palestinians when they established themselves. So they've been killing Palestinians ever since it was, you know, they declared their independence, which is freaking ridiculous. They've been, you know, murdering Palestinians since they were born 71 years ago. They're only 71 years of age. Palestine was there for hundreds of years. Don't they have a right to return too? That's the Great March, their right to return. Can't they return? If the Jewish people can return, then can't the Palestinian people return? How come? Because you're racist? So Tulsi Gabbard's done some interesting things. She's not articulate when it comes to Palestine. She seems to she doesn't want to criticize him whatsoever. I think she's running for president, so she's running to the right. And when it comes to Netanyahu, I think she showed up to the meeting. When it comes to the United Nations resolution, she didn't oppose it under the Barack Obama administration. She said she opposed the illegal settlements, but she wouldn't jump on board with the United Nations condemnation of the settlements. So she gives a statement saying that she opposes it, but then she didn't vote for the thing. So it's very rare the United Nations even comes down, that the United States ever allows the United Nations to actually, pass a resolution. So on Palestine, I only trust Mike Gravel. Mike Gravel just, hit it out of the park. He's saying we need to cut the funding, we need to limit AIPAC, we need to, make sure we don't give them a veto, we need a one-state solution, we need to protect, boycott, divest, and sanction, we need to protect BDS. How many of these Democrats say they need to protect BDS? Only Mike Gravel was saying that. So now that they're trying, now that the Congress has done this AIPAC bill which says BDS is bad, New York Times says it's anti-Semitic, well, now we can't even talk about it, right? So, I'm gonna start my own boycott, divest, and sanction movement. So whoever the fuck they went ahead and quoted, yeah, he might be leading the thing or whatever. He seems way more intelligent and articulate than what they give him credit for. And it's not like he's saying, the Jewish people. He's not saying anything anti-Semitic. It's not like he's just, spouting off a bunch of N-words for Jewish people. It's not like he's just, so it's like his intellectual argument, they went ahead and twisted it. So I, as a citizen, American citizen, I'm going to boycott, I'm going to divest and sanction against Israel because I don't like the shit that they're doing. And you want to get mad about it? I don't give a fuck if you get mad about that. I'm not going to buy Israeli goods because you're going to make me. And they need to be sanctioned. We need to find Israel. We need to divest from them. We cannot continue to invest in Israel. So this is my BDS movement now. So I am totally in solidarity with both the people of Israel and Palestine. I'm with the oppressed. And so Palestine is right now, in the current situation, is the oppressed between the Israel and Palestinians. And so maybe it wasn't like that in the beginning. I don't know. Maybe the balance of power is going back and forth. But for right now, the Palestinians are the oppressed. And so therefore, free Palestine. Remember Palestine. Stand up Palestine. Free Palestine. BDS. Boycott, divest, and sanction until Israel, pays or starts treating the Palestinians like their people. BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction. If you take away all the peaceful tactics, then, this is JFK. He says when peaceful revolution becomes impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. So by saying, boycott, divest, and sanction, these are really intelligent. It's not just protesting with a sign and a banner, but it's saying, divest, sanction, so pass laws, find them, divest, don't allow people to invest capital, and make sure they're the advertisers, call the advertisers and tell them what they're up to. So Tulsi Gabbard is right about a lot of stuff when it comes to war and peace, mostly with the regime change war. She's got a rule where she's opposed to all regime change wars, and this is major because we can build off this. This is a rule that she has. She's opposed to torture. As a rule, torture is bad. As a rule, regime change wars are bad. And so because, that's something, right? That's some sort of guiding ideology. The other ones, I don't see any guiding ideology. So because Tulsi Gabbard is opposed to regime change wars, well, she's opposed to Syria. Why are we in the Syrian war? For hegemony, to back Russia up? Is it to overthrow Assad? Yeah, it's to overthrow Assad. That's what we're in Syria for. So that's a regime change war. She's opposed to that. With the proposed wars in Venezuela and in Iran, she's been vehemently opposed to these regime change wars. Yemen, Saudi Arabia is committing genocide in Yemen right now with our protection, with the empires, our Security Council veto in the United Nations. With our protection, this genocide is being carried out. She's opposed to the Yemeni regime change war. So the regime change war has, the one difference, Afghanistan, she says she wanted just the combat operations. So that leaves anti-terrorism forces and security forces for the embassy that we leave behind. So the occupation force is still there. But Tulsi Gabbard when it comes to Afghanistan, she's only talking about removing the combat troops. So that was a regime change war. She was opposed to the war in Libya and opposed to the war in Iraq. But now that we're in it now, what are we going to do? Donald says he was opposed to the Iraq war, but he carried it on, and he's going to keep carrying it on. So, I mean, who gives a shit if you know, oh, I was against the War of 1812. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to end it, or are you going to keep carrying it on? So, you know, just because you're initially, I think Nancy Pelosi was like that. She was against it, then she was for it or some shit. So we've been conducting the war for quite some time. Tulsi Gabbard is right when it comes to cutting our ties with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia financed the 9/11 hijackers. 15 of the 19 hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. Donald Trump loves Saudi Arabia. Tulsi Gabbard calls Donald Trump Saudi Arabia's bitch, and he is. And this has been consistent, you know, through Obama and Bush and all the rest. Two, the Saudis, they just love holding hands with the Saudis and skipping around with them and, you know, talking bad about women and whatever the hell that they're trying to do. So they had that Khashoggi, there was a journalist, a prominent journalist who was criticizing Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia killed him in broad open daylight. Essentially, you know, they knew where he was going to be. There's audio recording of the thing, and then, you know, I think they strangled him and they murdered the guy. And then, you know, next day they're laughing, and Putin and, you know, Trump's just laughing it up, just having a good old time. So he won't criticize his Saudi Arabian buddies, which makes him Saudi Arabia's bitch. He's got some hotels in Saudi Arabia too. So he's got, you know, his own private corporation, or I think he gave it to his sons. But, you know, he wants to make Saudi Arabia happy so he can keep on making money even after when he's not president. Hell, he might run off to Saudi Arabia. He did so much for the Saudi Arabian princes and the royal, you know, the ruling royal elite. And so she's right when it comes to Saudi Arabia. She's right when it comes to cracking down on sexual assaults in the military. She wants to reverse the transgender ban. Tulsi Gabbard wants to end the nuclear arms race. Like all the other Democratic hopefuls, she is for the Iran nuclear deal. So, you know, there's this plank and that plank, but ultimately her major foreign policy plank is that she's opposed to regime change wars. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is in favor of the war on terror. So do not expect her to end the war on terror. The authorization to use military force, we got 2002 and 2003. There's two authorizations to use military force. One was for a global war on terror, and the other one was for the Iraq War. For the global war on terror, we're only supposed to go after Al-Qaeda and the people responsible for 9/11, and yet we had CIA giving some of the terrorists and CIA, Al-Qaeda, you know, weapons to go after Assad. And so that's, you know, what the hell are we doing? We're fighting a global war on terror, or are we financing a global, you know, war on terror? So she tried to get that bill passed, right? Stop Arming Terrorist Act. And apparently that bill was not popular. So we're in a war on terror, but we don't really want to stop arming the terrorists. So that was for the CIA. They were arming Al-Qaeda, Jabhat, Fatah al-Sham, and ISIL terrorists to fight our fight in Syria. Kamala Harris. Tulsi Gabbard says she's not qualified. Kamala Harris is qualified. Kamala Harris says that she's also going to end the Afghanistan, Yemen, Syrian wars too. The only thing, she didn't say anything about Venezuela, but when it comes to Iran, Afghanistan, Yemen, Syria, Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris are identical. So at least in their initial, you know, onset, they think that those wars are bullshit. Why? How did they get there? What will their war policies be? I don't know. But if you make the right choice, if you make the right decision, you know, that's all that matters. If you get us engaged in a war that we shouldn't have got engaged in, you started Vietnam, well, you fucked us over. So that's Truman. Harry Truman fucked us over when it comes to Vietnam. He's the one that started it. And so by knowing the difference between a good war versus a bad war, that means when you get up there, you know, so I essentially what I'm saying is Kamala Harris and Tulsi Gabbard, they have the same, they're ideologically the same. They're opposed to the same wars for whatever reasons, they're opposed to these wars. And so now we need to articulate ourselves a war policy. When do we strike? You know, Tulsi said, a red line said, if our troops ever get attacked. Well, what if our troops are, you know, there's been some crimes, there's been like rapes and torture and shit. So if our troops are raping and torturing and maybe murdering and they get attacked, then we got to defend that. So I feel like that's not a great red line. What about America? If the homeland gets attacked, that's clear, right? That's more clear to me. Then, you know, you don't want the military outfits, the military bases to get attacked, but if we're in, you know, the aggressive opposition, oppression, if we're on the wrong side, like in Vietnam, then that's, then we have to, what, my country right or wrong? No, that means we're in the fucking wrong, and that means we need to stop that shit, because what, we don't want to admit that we're fucking wrong? No, we're wrong. Let's stop doing it. So we must make sure we have a president that's in favor of peace, who will be cautious before they get us into another war. But ultimately, what's the president do? President, you know, signs legislation, vetoes legislation, makes speeches. They're the face of America, so there's, you know, there's more to the job than just their job requirements. But the job requirement is just what? You know, sign bills. So Kamala Harris is, you know, she can sign a bill. Sorry, I'm parched. So I have, how much more time here? So 4 more minutes. So on Tulsi Gabbard, when it comes to her war policies, I've given her passes several times. On torture, I gave her a pass. On drones, I gave her a pass. You know, drones, we're not using troops. On torture, as a general rule, she's opposed to torture. There's just some emergency situations when she thinks it would be okay. So I've given her a pass on several things. With the Netanyahu thing, with the anti-BDS thing, it's too much. And so I feel like she's number 2 still, but she's not as great as I once, you know, had suspected. There is a reason. You know, some people say, well, the Republicans love her and you should love her for that. No, I don't love her for that. I think, you know, that does make me, you know, raise an eyebrow. Now, she isn't as strong on Palestine as Bernie Sanders is, but she has criticized Israel's use of live ammunition along the border. Now, you know, I support Tulsi for many reasons. I mean, everything that I just mentioned prior, you know, the transgender reversing that, the surgery I don't care for, but for the cross-dressing, well, there's nothing wrong with that. For, let's see, what was the other, the sexual assaults, cracking down on sexual assaults. So the Palestinian thing, the BDS thing, that really kind of ticks me off, because if she can't show moral courage on that subject, I'm not sure if she'll be able to show any moral courage at all. So, let's see, Tulsi Gabbard, she talked about what? Extreme vetting. She says Islamic extremist. And, you know, I think some of those, you know, I still give her a pass today, but she's not as big of a peacenik. We have 27 wars that we're in, where you have 900 military bases in 150 countries. So what is she doing for the other wars? You know what I mean? There's 27 wars, and she's opposed to 4 of them. What about the other, you know, 23? What about the empire? So I want a crystal clear war policy, and also want to know what they're going to do with the empire. What's the vision for this American empire to move forward? What are we doing here? She's met with some dictators. The Modi of India, she was getting criticized for meeting with the Prime Minister Modi. So he's like the president of India. Tulsi Gabbard met with Assad, the president of Syria, and al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, or their, you know, equal counterpart. I don't know if it's prime minister, governor, what the hell is in Egypt or Syria. But she met with the dictator. Al-Sisi is the one that killed the Egyptian revolution. Assad is, you know, the Syrian war guy, so that's like our main enemy with you know, in Syria. And then Modi is just the prime minister of the largest democracy on the planet. So for democracy, or for diplomacy's sake, just for diplomacy's sake, when it comes to North Korea, we had nobody that was talking to North Korea except for Dennis Rodman. Is that our kind of diplomacy? Oh shit. Our diplomacy is just Dennis Rodman. So if Dennis Rodman, let's send him to Syria, send him to Egypt. I'd rather send Tulsi Gabbard to these places. So by keeping that door open for a diplomatic channel, if, you know, we can end the conflict with just conversation, then we should do that. But at the same time, Al-Sisi killed the Egyptian revolution, so there's only so much coddling that you can do to these dictators before you say, you know, regime change. But she's opposed to regime change. So then I guess we have to use other means, sanctions, I don't know, bad-mouthing the country. But, yeah, so I'm a little bit worried about her being cozy with these dictators. I've just given her too many passes to make the claim that she's the best candidate on matters of war and peace.